How are you? That's funny. Always funny.
Three fire chiefs.
Carry
Big chat.
All right. Welcome, everyone. This is a joint meeting of the Board of County Commissioners, the School Board of Manatee County, and the City of Bradenton City Council. Today is Monday, July 31st, 2023, and we welcome you to this unique gathering of three legislative bodies in this county. We're going to start in Manatee County. We always start in the same tradition. We start by honoring God, and then we honor our great nation. So today we have Pastor Andrew Meekhoff from New Generation Church, who will lead us in prayer, after which school board member and Colonel Tatum will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So at this time, if you're able, please stand.
Amen. Let us pray and bow our heads. God, the creator of the universe, we invite you into this place. As decisions will be made today, we humbly ask you to give us wisdom, guidance, directions from above. As we are reminded from the Bible that you are the perfecter of all things. So give us this day to make decisions based on goodness and to help our fellow men. The Bible says that where there's no counsel, people fall. But in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. So Father, give us this day guidance from above so we can all live in harmony and safety. And to this beautiful body that governs our county and city so we can all live in peace and harmony and love our neighbor as we love ourselves, which is the second greatest commandment that you give us. And God, we thank you that you gave Jesus to come 2023 years ago to give us guidance and to help us. And the message that you give us is this. The Bible says that God, you are holy and perfect, but we break laws. We hurt our fellow men and we do unspeakable things. But that's why you sent your son to forgive us, to teach us the right thing. According to history, you came, Jesus, and you lived a perfect life, and then you died a cruel and painful death on the cross to forgive of our wrongdoing and to set up a wisdom in the places like this, in institutions and government places, so we can make laws and we can govern our lands wisely. So Father, you said that if we put our faith in what Jesus Christ did 2023 years ago, that he came and he lived a perfect life and he died a cruel and painful death. And if we put our faith that Jesus Christ died for all of our sins, we can one day be forgiven and be with you in the holy place. But God, right now we are here on earth and we're asking you to make our beautiful community a blessing place to live, a holy place to live, a place where we can live together in harmony. And we break your laws, and that's why you give us these leaders to live and to help us to create laws so we can obey you more, Lord. And I thank you so much for the officers here today, God. Protect them, Lord God, and help them and give them also wisdom, Lord God, to execute these laws that we place to help our fellow men. And God, if you say again and again, if we put our faith in you, that you are the Son of God, that you died and resurrected, and 3 days later, we will be forgiven from all the trespasses we do against you and our fellow men also. So give us this day wisdom on the homelessness, on our efforts of new housing development, and the special needs that we will be talking about today. Give this governing body wisdom and decision making today so we can have unity, peace, and truth. Because divided we fall, but united we stand. So God, help us so we can have wisdom in this beautiful building today. We invite your presence. And everyone said, Amen. Amen.
The flag is up here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, sir. Very powerful message today. And thank you, Colonel Tatum, as well. All right, the agenda today starts with a discussion on homelessness and school district opportunities. Do we want to start with the school district? Commissioner Cruz, did you want to start discussing this item out of the gate?
Me?
You, sir.
No.
No? Okay, that's fine. Do we have a staff presentation would be the next question.
More of Amanda.
No? Do we have a staff presentation? We don't. Okay. I can deliver somewhat of an update regarding homelessness and families, and that Manatee County was awarded $41 million in opioid funds out of the lawsuit, and we're moving forward with the old District 2 Sheriff's Office facility, which is located on 57th, I believe. If you're on 41 and you turn there at Red Lobster, it's back there, it's 57th. And that building used to be an Army barracks. So there are already like 40 10 by 10 rooms and like 26 bathrooms located in that building. There's also a commercial kitchen located in the building. So we've applied, I think, $850,000 in the first vote towards rehabbing that building, remodeling the kitchen, sort of turning it into what will ultimately be a homeless shelter for families with children. Currently, the Salvation Army is the only site housing with emergency services for families with children. They have the capacity of 5. We think this is likely to shape up to have a capacity for 30 families. So that would be a massive improvement. The Salvation Army is also very interested in running this site for us. And we're looking for, obviously, I think a good discussion with the school district on how they can help us support this site, be it with tutors, be it with, and you're the experts, so perhaps you're who we need to lean to, but everything from a bus stop out front to tutors that could help our kids as well. We've even gotten into the weeds a bit, no pun intended, but Commissioner Ballard is working on a community garden. I mean, it seems like everyone's kind of taken this on to put their own touch on it, and I think it's going to fill a tremendously needed void in our community, and it fits a model that the County Commission seems to like, which is that we don't mind doing the one-time capital outlay on a project and getting it built out, and then doing a public-private partnership with an organization like the Salvation Army where they come in and run it, because we don't necessarily want to be in the business. However, we do understand that they don't have the resources to build a facility or create a facility from nothing. So if we can get them started and get them going, and then we're able to hand it off to them, that seems to be the model that we prefer.
Yeah.
Mayor Brown?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair. One of the things that we've been working through with the city is obviously we have the shelters in our downtown. We have the Salvation Army and we have Turning Points at this point. We have worked to actually had a zoning in progress where we weren't, I don't want to say not allowing them to grow, but we wanted opportunity to see what other venues were out there. And I appreciate the county working with this and the sheriff's office once they left that facility, because it does show that with our county, we think that we should be from corner to corner working together. And as we know, if you give opportunity to people, they will hopefully get better. And I know that there's some other opportunities that we'll talk through as we go in this meeting. But I'd just like to thank you to your staff and everyone here today for really organizing this and getting it together, because, in silos, we can't get anything done, but together, I think we'll be able to get a lot done. So thank you for that, Chair. And it wasn't that the city of Bradenton was being so negative towards the homeless. We were trying to incorporate and really grow our whole community. So thank you.
Chairman Osterbridge, thank you again and your staff for putting this all together. One of the reasons I think it's important for us to come together with the homelessness issues that we have here in Bradenton, especially from a school board standpoint, is the coordination. For us, we're not the first point of contact typically when there's a family and children involved. And so from our standpoint, we want to make sure, number one, the intake and that coordination is done right, using the Unite Us program, that when it's reported that we obviously get notifications from a school district standpoint to know what students are possibly in a shelter or potentially couch surfing or potentially living in cars. So we want to be able to know that in order to provide the services that we need to provide. I completely agree with you on the Salvation Army, the new spot, maybe some tutoring availability there. But also transportation. Transportation, if a family gets evicted or has to leave their home and then move to a shelter, I don't want the absence for that child in the school system to be because there's no transportation and we're not near the bus stop that he was there. So how can we alleviate that? Again, it's by the coordinating the intake process, and I think if we can streamline that. The shelters streamline. We know the sheriff, Braden Police. We all work on that Unite Us application, and so I think that to me is making sure that we're all together cooperating instead of we're using this system, that system. We do it this way, and like Mayor Brown said, if we can all work together, it's going to make it that much easier.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Sprague.
Okay, I'm glad you brought up the idea of the Salvation Army because I've talked to some of my people within circles, not the board, of course, I can't talk to them, but my recommendation was to start a VPK in the Salvation Army. There are students that go into our schools that cannot even hold a pencil. And if we have a VPK in the Salvation Army and this facility, that could bridge that educational gap that we have. It's such a challenge when a student comes in and they don't even know the basics of what they're to do. I would ask this body to make sure that we are looking at something like that, to bring in a VPK partnering with maybe the Early Learning Coalition to maybe spearhead that. I don't know what the venue would be or the dynamics of that would look like, but I do believe, getting VPK into something like that and the Salvation Army now, there's a lot of people, transit students that go in there and out all the time. If there was a 2 or 3 day a week VPK, I think that would be beneficial to the community going forward.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Commissioner Ballard.
Can't tell if this is on. There we go. It is. So, Cindy, I think that's a really, I think it's a great idea. My only concern would be that a lot of these families are moving around. They're transient. So if someone is in a shelter for, let's say, a max of 90 to 120 days, that kid is going to definitely, they're going to, have to move their VPK a couple of times. Which likely they're going to be doing anyway, I guess. But my concern would be for the continuity of the education. But I do think it's a great idea, and I'd also like to maybe see some opportunities for occupational therapy and things like that for some of these kids who don't know those really basic skills that they could maybe gain while their families are at the shelter. And one of the things that we loved about the site is it has a large space kind of in the front section that's administrative space. And several different nonprofits could potentially work out of that front space and do things to assist these families to help them get back on their feet. So possibly a temp agency for helping someone to find a job. Maybe we could have substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment, things like that, as well as maybe some therapy for kids.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilwoman Barnaby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that we were talking about having a bus stop there, but is it possible to have the MCAT also go by there? I think we were talking about school buses, but I'm wondering about, could impact?
It already runs down 57.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Super. Well, again, just piggybacking on what people are saying, if you have people that are homeless and they need to find employment, not only would you need to do some sort of VPK and educational training, you may need to look at some sort of daycare situation as well, so that the children are taken care of, particularly if they're younger and they're not of school age, while the parents are out trying to basically put their lives back together.
Does ELC, perhaps you know that, ma'am?
You can go ahead first.
Well, I was going to pose a question. Does through ELC vouchers, I mean, isn't that already, I think, covered?
That was exactly my thought as well.
Okay, it sounds like perhaps it is. Councilwoman Gonzalez Moore.
Just from a practical standpoint, I think our focus should be making sure that there's a continuum of care versus what we're going to staff this particular location with. The Salvation Armies, the care agencies already, I think, have the tools that they need to really address the problems. I think for our purposes, it would be better to think in terms of having a lead point agency so that issues can be addressed, having services readily available, not necessarily trying to fix this one facility with everything that we think that they might need.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With this facility will also facilitate for single women. It's just not going to be for families completely, which we hope will free up the Salvation Army to be able to take more men to get them off the streets. But this facility is just a starting point. We need more facilities like this. So I'm wondering if the school board has any properties that could be retrofitted to be a type facility like this. Granted, this is pretty easy to do because it was already what it is. We just have to go back and retrofit it, tear down some walls, clean up some stuff, put a new roof on, those type of things. But is there any facilities within the school board that can help us move forward for homelessness?
Chairman Choate.
What'd you say? Oh, I thought I was having to push it. So we have not discussed any of our properties to be refurbished or be used. There's no empty buildings not being used to then, refurbish something, if that was kind of the question. But certainly as the properties and things like that, sure, we can absolutely look into them, but we have not ever discussed that from on our side, or discuss it as a board to our staff to say which ones potentially could be a site for that, and what location. Off the top of my head, that location in the Salvation Army, I think if we ever were going to look at property, we want to make sure we coordinate that as best we possibly can and not necessarily maybe put them right next to each other. But it is something we could, that I would be willing to look into. Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else want to weigh in on this? Yes, ma'am. Councilwoman Coachman.
In terms of transporting the students from the shelter to the schools, we might need to be mindful of the continuity of what school they were in prior to going into the shelter, as opposed to transporting them to the closest school of that whatever level they need. Maybe with this transportation, also realize you're going to be, dispersing to different schools so that they would have that continuity as well.
Yeah.
No, I agree completely. I think that the students are already going through a traumatic time with whether it being evicted or the homeless, dealing with that. I don't want to add to that by taking them from one school and making them go to another school. And that's something that I know this isn't homeless, but I mean, foster, same type of thing, right? And I know that's maybe a different topic, but we would have to figure out something logistically to figure out, how do we get students to their rightful schools, and not just because their temporary address has changed because of the shelter. You would want to make sure that their way of life school wise is as close as it possibly could be before. But and that's why I go back to the communication aspect. We don't know what we don't know. As a teacher and a kid walks into my classroom, I don't know what happened last night in his life unless it was something was told to me or he or she reported to me. So I think that's the biggest key is how do we, is all the nonprofits in all of the county and the city and school district, we got to be on that same page to report. And then that helps us with the data as well. So that way, if little Chad, I was actually called that my whole life, little Chad walks into the classroom and had an issue last night, how you as a teacher want to know okay, he may not be as responsive today. He probably didn't get any sleep. He's probably going through obviously a lot of emotional issues, mental issues. So, today may not be the best day to press those buttons on why he's not working, right? And so, but that all comes back to, and I think the facilities are needed and all those things are needed, but the coordination of reporting so we can get the help that's needed is, for us as a school district, the number one thing on a daily basis for the children.
Yeah, really very valid points. You'll go by Little Chad, and I'll go by Big Kevin from this point forward. I think that works out. Councilwoman Coker, Vice Mayor.
Yes, he touched on it a little bit, and this is amazing. I think this will be a great addition, but I feel like we're missing a whole part by not addressing mental illness. It seems like that is coming to the forefront with a lot. I realize that's probably less the homeless families and more the individuals, but I mean, is there anything we can do to kind of offer more services where that's concerning, or I just feel like it really needs to be addressed. Maybe it's the heat, but it seems like it's really.
No, I mean, yes, but no. I think you're right. You're pointing out like an obvious, I think. You're getting into addiction and mental illness, and that's probably your leading causes by a significant degree of homelessness. However, we want to take care of, we're Christians. We love our fellow man, and we want to take care of the people who are in our community. But there becomes a fine line of offering services to an extent to where we start to draw folks to our services from outside of our community. And at some point, you have to be responsible about ensuring that we do not overburden our taxpayers and our citizens with is essentially providing services for people who live way outside of Manatee County. And we want to help people, of course, but if I think what I'm getting at is that what you're touching on is a much bigger issue than Manatee County. It's a state issue to a great extent, and I don't know that any of us in this room is in the healthcare industry. We're sheltering someone is one thing. Starting to provide for healthcare is stepping into a new. I mean, my heart is in the same place as yours, but I'm responsible for other people's money.
Well, I think I'm more referring to the opioid money.
Sure.
It just seems like such a direct correlation.
Sure.
And I don't know I know there's a lot of strings probably attached to the money, but it seems like some of it would be appropriately.
Not as many strings as you might think, actually. Would anybody else? Commissioner Ballard.
So we are starting to leverage those funds for a couple of things that I think are going to be really useful and helpful in that way. One of the biggest things that we are doing this year is that we are fully funding drug court for the first time. So drug court won't be utilizing grant funding. So those grant funds can be opened up and used for other purposes and kind of new and creative things. I'm also looking at the possibility of a community care court, which they have in Sarasota, which is also known as homeless court. And it's another specialty court that is meant to assist people who have committed crimes and are also struggling with homelessness. There are some alternative sanctions involved. Sometimes people get involved with cleaning up some of the messes that homeless individuals tend to make. And so it seems like it could be a really good program. I've got a couple meetings coming up on that. And those are kind of cost-effective things that we're doing that I think can have a big impact on the homelessness issue. There's also a couple of bigger things that are in the works, but I'm not ready to talk about those yet.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mayor Brown.
Thank you. And I think, the points that have been made are very well taken from the standpoint of what individually a not-for-profit could do, like a Salvation Army, a Turning Points, and some of the others. But when you look at it, there is services out there like we ask about, but it's what our law enforcement, what our other groups can do to get them to those services. And obviously, if some of them want to go, they'll go. But the people that are chronically homeless that don't want the help, That, I think, is probably one of the bigger issues we got to deal with, of not that we're forcing them to get help, but what can we do to guide them, direct them, help them want to be there? Because ultimately, we know if they get that help, they're going to be a better off, whether it's drug, whether it's other issues. So I think, probably, we talk about homelessness and what we can do for a one-off. As Councilman Moore said, we're kind of talking about one-offs, and it's going to be great. But we need to do globally what we can do in this community to change some of that direction. And, I do believe Salvation Army does different than Turning Points. And those are our two big ones that we deal with. But Salvation Army is an overnight facility, basically. Then they try to get you to services, where Turning Points is a daytime facility that doesn't have any overnight. So how do we coordinate that? And again, I'm going to say globally, because everything can't happen in downtown Bradenton. It's got to be globally. Doing this facility is that first start. But what's next? Is there property that we can work and then help at Turning Points get to a point where they can grow to a bigger facility without creating the issue that Chair Van Ostenbridge said, oh, look, it's better in Bradenton, it's better in Manatee County, let's leave XYZ and get there. So, I think there's a lot of things that we're talking about here, and, the educational part of it is very important, but we've got to get the housing transitional part of it with the mental health part of it somehow addressed without us being we don't have endless pockets. So I think that it's a good starting point, and that's why, when I talked with Chair Van Ostenbridge and Chair Choate, to have this meeting was so important to get where we're all in the same room. And I appreciate I think everybody's here today, except for our new commissioner will be on tomorrow. Hopefully he's watching, or he is back there. Okay, good. I was
Back of the
hoping
room.
he would be.
Cheap
He's
seats.
here. But I just think that it's something, if we can talk about as a group, we can start to come up with a plan. We've got a new person here in town, and Dr. Weissong, that's new. Maybe I heard him talk the other day at Tiger Bay, and you brought, bring some good things from where you came from, do some good things we do here. Maybe there's some things he can talk with your board about that are saying, hey, this is what I saw where I'm from. And it's, so we all want to try to work into that next level. And because sometimes we get on the blinders and we don't see that one thing that can help. And just to kind of talk to a point of, it goes off the target a little bit, but I wanted to hit it. We were talking about some of the programming in some of these facilities. We're working on with our city park and our community center, that exact type of programming that's in close to that area, that if all that can go well, which the county's on board, hope the school district will be on board, in the city for our new transitional area there. But, it's going to be part of this, but it'll be a down the road part of it. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Councilwoman Coachman.
I guess this will be kind of down the road as well, but we can't forget about, Salvation Army tends to focus on single moms and their families. They're sometimes single dads. And where do they go? And also the families that have mom and dad. We don't want to discourage, mom and dad from being with the children in a shelter. Mom and the kids get to go, and then dad's outside somewhere. So also just get that.
It's a valid point. I guess, Commissioner Ballard, you've been working probably most closely of all the commissioners. I assumed that some families would have two parents or potentially single dads, and that they would be welcome.
So the facility actually is kind of split into almost two sections that could be secured quite easily. So I believe it has been always the intention that if there's a family with two parents, or if there's a dad, that we would be able to accommodate those types of families as well. And we've even been talking about kind of movable walls and things like that. So if we need to accommodate a single woman, it's really easy. If we need to accommodate, a family with a mom, a dad, and a grandma, and a child, we can do that too.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Spray.
I know one of the legislative priorities that was brought to our delegation last year was, I think, $200,000 for prevention, people about to be evicted, people that need a service, but we don't have enough counselors and/or staff to accommodate that. And I know that was huge on the list, but it didn't get any funding. So I would ask this body to put this on their priority list as well for a county, that we get more funding to prevent the homeless at the end stage, before they're right at the tipping point. They may need help with rent or a light bill, water bill, whatever. We didn't get that funding. And I was so disappointed because the presentation that was given and the documentation that was provided with that didn't get any attraction at all. So if we can prevent the homeless, then I think we can. But my focus is the students, of course. There are many adults, to your point, Mr. Chair, some adults just don't want any other lifestyle than what they're doing. We can't change their mindset, and it's not up to us or anybody in this room to force them to do a program that they don't want to do. I'm more about the child and the parent that has that child. And if they're sleeping in a car or under a bridge, that's the primary focus for me. That's why if they are in a facility, we need to provide services to help get them into our educational areas with just a little bit of an edge that they wouldn't have got otherwise. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, ma'am. And Manatee County does have a rental assistance program that we run through Community and Veteran Services. And yeah, I think you're right. I think that we're here talking about families and people who have fallen into a bad situation and slipped through the cracks and for whatever reason find themselves at the verge of homeless or homeless. I don't think we're talking about single working age able-bodied men who are passing on an honest day's work voluntarily for a different lifestyle choice or for addiction purposes or reasons. I think that's a law enforcement component. I think we're talking about trying to give a hand up to those who want it. So, Mrs. Foreman, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was going to ask, 40 units just seems awfully small. Has anybody looked at how many families are typically homeless at a given time? And then I would follow that up with question about, we've got the DeSoto Mall out there. I know that they're selling off parts of it. Has anybody considered that, and turning that into a larger facility, which could provide some of the counseling and.
Yes, ma'am. The mall is in private hands,
I know.
and there is a development proposal coming forward. Commissioner Ballard, you might be able to help us, though, with my understanding. This hasn't come to the board for a vote, the D2 facility yet. I mean, it did initially came to the board for a vote for funding, but we haven't gotten into the weeds on how it'll be run day to day. My assumption was that it'd be an emergency shelter and it would be temporary housing. Commissioner Ballard?
That's correct. It would definitely be a temporary situation. Now, I don't think it would be temporary in the way that the Salvation Army is temporary, like day by day by day. Hopefully, it would be a situation where a family could get their feet under them for a couple of months. But we had our point in time study. I think that the total of homeless individuals that we were looking at overall was somewhere around 500. And how many of those are children or part of larger family units? I don't have that information specifically, but really this opportunity came up. It was a great opportunity. It was something that we could do quickly. The location was right. Infrastructure was basically there. And so we made the decision to jump on it, knowing that it's not the be-all, end-all. It's not going to solve homelessness in Manatee County, but it can make a huge difference for a lot of people.
Just
Yes, Mrs. Moore.
to follow up, Commissioner Ballard's comments, that data is all available, I believe, on the county website. I'm not sure exactly the route you get to it, but the task force that Commissioner Ballard and I are a part of right now, I think has a lot of data from that study that was commissioned, and also tasks designated, checkable action points. So if anyone, I mentioned this at our last city council meeting, but I would encourage all of us to read that report and to follow the work of the task force. They post a quarterly update, I believe it is, quarterly. So their efforts, what tasks have been checked off. From a more policy standpoint, I think that that's going to be pretty important for all of us to stay on top of what's happening with that.
Thank you.
Right. Anyone else on the subject of homelessness before we move forward? Yes, ma'am, Mrs. Spray.
Just one comment that somebody said, we don't know how many. I think Commissioner Ballard said 500 families
No, total.
total. Well, at the last meeting that we had with this body, we had a presentation that there were 1,500 homeless students. So that kind of is, all right. It may not be a person out on the street. It's a person that may be in a home sleeping on a couch or in a car. So I just wanted to clarify that report was given to us last time we had this body.
Yeah, and to that point, and to Mrs. Foreman's point, we're not under, I don't think, an illusion that this one site or this one facility is going to solve a problem that has plagued society since forever. But it hopefully is a step in the right direction, and hopefully it helps many of our fellow citizens and those who are, most at risk, is the thought. So, okay. All right, shall we move on then to discussion on affordable housing? Commissioner Cruz, I'm almost positive you added this item to the agenda, sir.
I didn't add any.
Are you sure?
I didn't even know of this meeting. So.
I could have sworn you added this item.
I
know I added
I may
3 and 6 were mine.
I may have. I don't remember when it was asked. I mean, it's usually what I add to any agenda. So I guess in theory I could have. Maybe it's just a standing ad for every council of governments meeting or whatever. If I'm going to start off, I just think with the 3 groups here, we have a housing issue here, which is equal to or greater than obviously the homeless issue, in part because, as it was mentioned previously, about paying for bills and keeping people in their house. It's a lot easier to fix homelessness when people aren't homeless in the first place. And having affordable places to live, I know we just had one of our applications for county administrator drop out because he said it's just not affordable to live here. It's becoming more and more prevalent around here. It's getting more and more cost prohibitive to live here. And we all need to do our part to figure out how to make this work. And we have 3 of the main groups here. We got the largest municipality, we got the county, and we got the school board, which is the largest employer. And honestly, the biggest need for affordable housing comes from the school board. Between the salaries that teachers make, especially starting teachers, all the people who work within the school board itself, from the bus drivers to the aides, you name it, to the kids that are either homeless or under house relative to living on people's couches. It's the biggest need, but we all need to do our part, I believe, and we have a long ways to go, but the county is making a proactive attempt. Through Livable Manatee, we've been waiving every impact fee we can come up with, waiving permitting fees, you name it. We've been taking the excess land we have and trying to find people to use it, to build, and we've been trying to increase density and height and do everything we can to encourage affordable housing. And honestly, in the past 8 to 12 months, we've approved more land use agreements for affordable housing than like the previous 8 years because of the steps we're taking. But right now, I think that we need everyone to be looking at excess land that they've got. I know there is some, and figuring out how it can best be utilized for housing, whether it be workforce, affordable, you name it. And people need to start looking at the fees that they're charging people and being willing to take their hit along with us, because we have big needs for our impact fees, and we're figuring out ways to cover a huge chunk of impact fees for our roads and our libraries and our parks and our public service. But I hear time and time again, I'm not saying it's all the time, I'm not accusing anybody, I'm just stating fact because that's why we're all around this table. I hear all the time, yeah, I can get the county the county impact fees waived, but I'm still stuck with $6,300 in school board impact fees. Everyone kind of needs to do their part to get this to work. It doesn't do any good if we're waiving $8,000 in fees and they're still stuck with $6,300 worth of fees, because well, you have to build schools, we have to build roads. We're both in the same place, and both of us have large buckets of money. I think you guys maybe have a little bit larger bucket of money to make that up. So we all need to work together. We need to be looking at land we have. We need to be looking at, hey, do we really need this excess land over here by Wakeland? Do we need this excess land over here by Bayshore? Just like we're looking at all of our excess land and doing it. I just had a conversation with somebody in this room about excess land that we have that we're looking at. So that's my point. We all have a big need for it. I think the school board is the biggest need. I've said this to a few of you before on one-off basis. I think something I would encourage you to look at is taking some of your excess land, especially since it doesn't have to be rezoned now with SB 102. If it's commercial, industrial, mixed use, people can build on as of right. Work with developers, and you don't even have to give away your land like we do. Work out a deal. Say, hey, I'll give you this land to build workforce housing, affordable housing, but we as a school board want to effectively pre-lease or master lease 25% of it, 50% of it on a long-term lease, so that you can go out and get those first-year students right out of master's degree to come in as beginner teachers and give them a place as an incentive to get them employed. That's going to go a long way to getting better quality teachers here, which creates better quality education for all of our kids. It's a great opportunity for the school board because you can actually use some of those units and trade that as part of your land purchase with these people. I mean, I would just encourage you to really think about proactively working on affordable housing so we can all kind of get on the same page and move this forward.
Chairman Choate?
I completely agree with Commissioner Cruz. I mean, there is, a part of our staff is need for housing, right? We're about to build 5 new schools in 5 years and about a roughly 800 to 1,000 employees. Where are they going to live, right? My first, just a couple things you said. First response is I want to make sure that the school district's number one mission is education and providing education for kids. And I do believe there is some possible land space, and I would like to look into stuff and how we can help. But I also want to be mindful of once you get rid of something or you allow someone to lease and build something, that it's over. If you needed it for a school or growth later on, etc., it's gone, right? Or you're going to have to kick people out of their houses, and now there's an issue on the school districts kicking people out of their houses because they need this land back to build a school, etc. But we do need to work together. I 100% agree with you. I think one of the easiest things we can do, and we have been doing, and we're about to finalize it, is our impact fees, right? And so we've for a long time have been. You said 6,300. It's been one price. We're tiering it now for sure. And I think just this morning, talking to our deputy of operations, making sure that we communicate, the county and us communicate properly on when a project meets your standards for the workforce housing or affordable housing, et cetera, that we're working together. We know that, so we can give the discounts like we would like to too, up to 25%. So we are definitely changing the way things have been for that reason. But I'm just like when Commissioner Ron asked about properties for homelessness. I'm okay with looking at properties. At the end of the day, we've got to make sure though that the land that we do have is not intended for potential school use. And I don't know the answers to that, right? We have staff people that do that. So, but I agree, we all need to get together and do it.
Any other school board members want to chime in? Okay. Mayor Brown?
Thank you. And great comments by both. Commissioner Cruz, you made a statement at the beginning, and I really was thinking about it with, we had a candidate for our administrator drop out because of affordable housing. So when you talk about that, how do we define affordable housing when you're talking about a top executive can't even afford to be here?
Yeah, well, I meant more from the standpoint of our cost of living in Manatee County is getting cost prohibitive across the board. We had somebody who was going to be a director for one of our departments drop out for the same reason. I talked to people who run companies around here who says the hardest thing they're doing right now is trying to get anybody to move here. I'm not talking like the $30,000 a year person. I'm talking about the $80,000, $100,000, the young professionals that create a dynamic workforce in Manatee County, which will future encourage more companies to come here. Nobody can afford to come here. It all drifts down. I was using it as a concept of Manatee County is just effectively becoming cost prohibitive across the board, and we need to do what we can. And part of it is on the lower end because that's where we have a little bit more. The top end is the market. It's they're choosing to build stick structure 3-bedroom 2-bath houses and sell them for $800,000. I can't stop them from doing that, but I can help facilitate the workforce housing and the affordable housing on the bottom end of it, which are effectively the people who are building the $800,000 houses.
Well, that's one of the reasons. I knew what you were going to say because I figured that in a good way for us. But when we talk about the workforce type affordable, a lot of people think we're talking about even lower income housing, which we're not really. We're talking about that beginning teacher, beginning nurse, beginning police officer, firefighter, kind of those things that hopefully after a couple of years, they have got to a point where they can make that next move from this. And first off, I'd like to thank the county, and we've said this before, that there's 3 projects in the city that we're doing with workforce affordable housing that are actually 2 of them without the county participation probably wouldn't be under construction right now. And so it's something that we have done, and the city of Bradenton for years has already been working on impact fees and doing that to kind of do it. And then the other thing we're working on, which will play into this in some areas of our urban core downtown, is our density. And we're working on that right now, and it came to the council for a first reading or for kind of an explanation at our last meeting. So I hope that we all stay cognizant of that, hey, sometimes the density gives you some of that and may make it more affordable for somebody to live, no matter what, whether it is attainable or whether it is market rate. So I think, we really get some of the community confused because they think this is more Section 8 housing, which it's not. It's workforce. And that's, I think, a very important thing because, when you're even talking about an executive might have changed his mind a little bit, it's hard to say, well, that's market rate.
I think the intention of that was, first up, we're not paying county administrators $1 million salaries by any stretch. They're still middle market type home buyers. And the fact that 24 months ago, the average home price in Manatee County was $250 or so, and now it's like $500,000. Like it's become cost prohibitive for literally everybody here, and so it only makes it that much worse, and it's that much more of an impact on the lower level when places used to rent for $1 a square foot, and you can go out and get a 700 square foot apartment for $700 a month, and now that same apartment's $2,000. I can promise you wages didn't go up commensurate, especially when you're talking about fixed income on the senior level, which is an even bigger problem because their fixed income's their fixed income, and most of it's probably tied to bonds, which are making virtually nothing.
And the occupancy rate and the sale rate is virtually zero.
There is no sale rate for existing houses because no one unless they're moving, nobody can afford to walk away from a 3% mortgage and then have to go buy again at 7%.
But the new and the apartments are virtually rented out or sold. So, we've got to figure out where that market is, why everything's sold or everybody's renting. So, so I don't know. So it's a tough, we're not the only ones. It's not just Manatee County.
Oh, our deputy county administrator has the solution, Mrs. DePaul.
Not the solution.
She waved her hand.
I was going to offer some information. I've got Rowena in the back too with staff, but the area median income of our area is the number 2 in the state. It's around 98,700. Oh, all right, I remember that number. So really, and to the mayor's point, he's right that this really, when it comes down to what that rental would come out to, it's about $2,000 a month is affordable. And so I just wanted to clarify the point on not being Section 8, that's exactly right. I mean, $2,000 a month is still pretty significant for some families, but that's the definition of affordable.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Since no one's raising their hand, I'm sorry, Mrs. Spray, School Board Member Spray.
I just want to say that Commissioner Cruz said a key word, market rate. By Mixon's Fruit Farms, they're building housing there. I went to the town hall meeting when they had that, and they said the value of those homes were going to be around a $250,000 market rate. That's what they were building them. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be workforce, affordable, label it any way you want. You drive by, 6 months later, that $250,000 sign goes up to $300,000. Then you go by again, 6 months later, it's $400,000. So I'm all about capitalism, but we're hurting our own community with our own developers doing that. I don't understand how that works. As far as the county goes, you say you can build this many houses at this rate, whether it's a 4-1, a 3-1, whatever, then this percentage has to maintain affordable rate or affordable workforce housing, whatever. Do we track that? Do we track that they still maintain that percent of housing?
Well, if they have that agreement, we do. The location you're pointing out, of course, is in the city of Bradenton, so.
Okay.
You would
Okay,
want to steer
Mayor.
your comments towards the mayor and the council.
Okay. That's not just that community, but it's other developments as well that's
Sure.
been going up.
Commissioner
They change
Priest.
your sign every other month, it seems like. Okay.
Yeah, I would guess that's just market rate, and that was the prices they were charging based on the location, because it's in the city of Bradenton and not the Superior unincorporated Manatee. No, if it's under a LoRa agreement, which I would guess, with a very, very few exceptions, we're only doing LoRa's on rentals. So if you're talking about single-family homes, unless it's like Habitat or a few one-offs, there's not a whole lot. It's very hard to deal with affordable housing relative to for sale right now. We deal with rental, and that's a percentage of area median income. And as was discussed, our area median income went from about 70,000 to 90,000 in no time, like a snap of a finger. That's a 20% increase in area median income, which effectively drives rent up the same because it goes based on HUD thresholds. If it's houses, and it's not under LoRa, I'm guessing it's not, then they can charge whatever they want. We don't approve things based upon conditions of maximum price sales for market rate. That's how the economy works. So you can keep going. You drive all around Parish, drive all around East County right now. Like, you have these beautiful signs saying, come by here, and it says starting at. And the part of the sign that has the starting at price is like an inch farther out than the whole rest of the sign, because every month they put a different sticker on it with another $50,000 increase on the price. So we can't dictate that. They can sell them for whatever they want, and at some point they're going to sell them for too much, and then they'll have to come back down. That's their call. But LoRa's we do keep track of, yes.
Thank you, sir. And phone lines are lighting up now. Vice Mayor Coker and then Commissioner Bearden. Ma'am?
Yeah, just mostly, I mean, obviously, the prices are driven by supply and demand, period. And I think that what we're focusing on, and I think is increasing the density, because that way you can have more supply. It's more environmentally sound. It's a strong planning principle to have higher density in your urban core. And hopefully, and I am hesitant to have too much rental property and not enough market rate. I mean, we need we need to have it all. We can't just have affordable housing projects. We need the market rate, we need to plan for it and put them in the appropriate places. I hate to see us get too far off in anything and try to control that market.
Spoken like a proud member of the Association of Realtors, ma'am. Thank you very much. Appreciate those comments. Commissioner Bearden, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I think the main thing, and I know that we've been working on it, I don't know exactly where we're at, but as a governing bodies, I think we need to create opportunity for the open market, right? One that we spoke about was creating the tiny home districts, right? What is that going to define? 800 to 1,000 square foot homes. Can we put those on 5 to 10 acres, right? How many can we put on 5 to 10 acres, right? And create those opportunities so that the free market could come in and capitalize on those opportunities and be able to create those homes that are out there. I mean, that's the way that I look at it. I mean, that's how we create more affordable housing, is create the opportunity for the entrepreneurs that want to come in and create those tiny homes or whatever that might be. I mean, and I know that we're doing that. Courtney DePaul, are we working on that, and where are we at with that right now?
So staff is here too, and they can talk a little bit more about it. We've done the half dwellings already. There's some things that we've been working on. I've got Bill O'Shea that's going to come and say a few words. I think is the podium. Where do you want him to talk? Podium.
Bill, right there, the podium right there.
Oh, perfect, right in the front.
Chair, could I make a quick comment while he's coming up?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So, City of Bradenton several years ago sold some property, surplus property we had in East Bradenton over kind of east of Manatee Elementary on Manatee Avenue. And they were building smaller homes, the tiny homes. And, when it was sold to us, I was the councilman at the time, and it was sold to us probably somewhere 159, 179, probably 700, 800 square feet. And there's, I believe, 7 of them, if I'm not mistaken, something of that. And it was really something, hey, that's really cool. When they got done with them, I believe they were over 300,000, and they sold all 7 of them like that. So, that's where the Lura, we didn't do on that. But again, it was market rate, and I was disappointed because we thought they were going to be the tiny affordable home. Correct. And in reality, and I'm not one that says that, I'm for the free market and I'm for, people making a profit. Correct. But there's also some situations where you look at it and you go, wow. But they sold like that. And now that little development is built out. So that's something to think about.
And the mayor has another great point that half dwelling is the same way. But we have seen a lot of success with the affordable housing developments using the half dwelling, which is the 750 square feet or less. It counts as a half unit instead of one entire unit. So we've seen a lot of success with that. And then Bill O'Shea is here with staff. He's the interim comprehensive planning manager at Manatee County.
Mr. O'Shea, before you start, Commissioner Cruz.
I just want to point something out that, and I'll just agree to disagree a little on your comment. You're talking about the Braden cottages or whatever right there, right? Because at first they said they were going to build more than that, I believe. They had additional land.
This was just a one-off.
Yeah, there was 7 of them. They kind of
7 of
faced
them.
each other, but they were trying to get some other land.
Parking, yeah, that's probably the same.
I toured those when they were first building them.
They did that.
Here's the thing. Here's where I kind of disagree. Those effectively, by lowercase a standards, are affordable. We just finished talking about an average house is $550,000. You're selling it for $300,000. That's affordable to somebody. That may not be capital A affordable, Laura agreement. Let's oversee everything they do forever in terms of percent sales in the future. But they built smaller footprint homes that even selling them at full market value without restrictions still came out at $300,000. You take a mortgage on a $300,000 house, I bet you teachers and first responders can afford to live there. They may not get a 1,800 square foot place with a pool and all that, but most of them don't need that. Most of them need a roof and something in close proximity where they're working. So those, in my mind, did work. And I congratulate you for doing them. I love them. I actually looked into coming up with similar zoning that you guys used for that because I liked what you did there and how you clustered and allowed for that, similar to what Commissioner Beard and Saga. But they are affordable. They're not $100,000 affordable, but if you go talk to Bernie over at Habitat for Humanity, the Habitat for Humanity houses are like $250 right now, $275 right now. They're barely over a Habitat price, and you don't have to go out and build it yourself.
Yeah, I'm not disappointed probably in what they ultimately turned out, because I think you probably could have got 2 homes if you built standard, where I think we got 7 there now. But I was disappointed in what we did for the price of what we sold them to them for what we thought we were going to be at. So, again, when you're talking, we virtually gave them the property to do an affordable, and it may be affordable to that person at the time, but we were thinking it was going to be 149 to 156, and the market changed. I'm not against that, so I don't disagree with that, but I think that if we're going to look at something like that in the future, my opinion only is if the market changes like that, maybe there should be something, because we gave it to them at such a discounted price, that there may be an opportunity to claw some of that back.
Correct, and that's the outlet. That's the addition to the conversation. I didn't know you were giving away free land to market rate developers.
Well, because it was going to be
affordable. Any
affordable.
ideas?
Right, it was going to be affordable.
All right, I didn't know you gave away the land. That is a different story.
And I think what I'm talking about, not just with government entities giving land away, but also creating the opportunity for those people who own 10-acre plots of land in and out of the county or wherever that might be. I think that's a great opportunity if we can create some type of zoning in regards to that. I know it's going to be a discussion, and I'm sure that you're going to help me with that.
To Commissioner Cruz's point,
Yeah.
just quick, $300,000 mortgage with 3.5% down, which is pretty common for a conventional 30-year fixed at 6.5%. taxes and everything, you come out about $2,400 a month. It's
And-
affordable.
And 2,000 is what we said was the start of affordable in Manatee County, and that's for a rental. This is you own a home with equity in it, so.
Right.
Correct.
I
Okay.
think it works out well.
Now that we're done with that, Mr. O'Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, board members, school board members, and council members. My name is Bill O'Shea. I'm with Comprehensive Planning. To answer your question on tiny homes, you might recall that in March, we had a discussion with the board, or it came up, I think it was during commissioner comments. The board had directed staff to look at tiny home communities that combine both tiny homes on foundations or stick-built homes and tiny homes on wheels. We were directed to look at some jurisdictions within Florida, and then we further looked into some other jurisdictions in northern Florida. And as we had discussed before, there really is nowhere that we can find that combines tiny homes on wheels with tiny homes on foundations. From the state's perspective, a tiny home on wheels is defined as an RV, and the tiny home on foundations would be governed under Florida Building Code. So what we were planning on doing is, I believe it's May 24th, I was going to be coming back to you, I'm sorry, August 24th. I was coming back to you with a report to find out what I found out, maybe get different direction on tiny homes. We were also going to discuss, and Commissioner Cruz is well up to speed on the new legislation and what it allows for. We're going to discuss that with the board. There are some options, and we wanted a little bit of direction on what to do with the new affordable housing allowances. We do have an opinion from the county attorney's office with a skeleton land development code text amendment to kind of incorporate the new legislation into our rules, because essentially the rules are non-compliant with our comprehensive plan and land development code. So it's, if you will, providing an exception to those rules. And we are planning on coming to you, like I said, August 24th. So if you have any specific questions, I can answer those at this time. One of the questions too is, technically by state definition, a tiny home is 450 or square feet or less. So the question would be, do we want to limit it to 450 square feet? Do we want to allow a little bit more square footage? Because that's really going to dictate the size lot that we need to be looking at for these tiny homes.
Any comments? Mr. O'Shea, I appreciate you hopping up. You explained it so well that no one had a question. But I do appreciate you jumping up at a moment's notice.
Thank you.
While we're in the weeds, Commissioner Cruz, because there are some like unintended things that come with, you mentioned the school board, either leasing housing for workforce. I don't know if you meant, would it be in your mind, or, you know, would your vision be that it would be workforce housing for their workforce, or just in general? Because you start to get into the weeds on this, and there's catch-22s, right? Like, if you have an employee that's not paying, they have to evict them, right? Or if someone gets terminated, they're also evicted. I assume you would have your vision would be like a third party would manage it, not the school district, but.
There's all different ways. And people are doing this. We're not inventing anything. This is being done right now. In fact, it was part of the process for the SB 102, which was approved because you had a lot of companies that are having trouble bringing in employees, and you have some really good developers around here. For instance, like the Vengroffs, like Mark, are working with these companies because now you can build as of right on commercial and industrial. A lot of companies own land that is zoned commercial and industrial, and it's excess land. You can now build residential. You don't even have to come in front of our board. You just get your permits and put a shovel in the ground. So if companies can do it, then I don't see a reason why a school board couldn't do something similar. The companies are doing it where they're either fronting the money and then putting their own employees in there, or working with third-party developers like Mark, and working out deals to get a percentage of the space for themselves to use for their employees. So I see where you're saying with that. You don't want it to become like a company town kind of situation where you get fired and it's like, well, guess what? Not only you fire, but you're also homeless. Like, that's kind of a double. It's like buying too much stock in the company you work for. But I'm sure there's ways that's outside the scope of my knowledge. I'm not an attorney for that, but there are companies actively doing that and looking at it right now in Manatee County. So somebody will have figured out how to make that work as a best practice.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Are there any other comments on affordable housing before we move? Yes, sir. Mr. Tatum.
Just to Mr. Cruz's comments, sir, there's a big difference between government providing housing for workers and private companies providing housing for workers. There's a lot of liability that goes along with something like that, as we kind of discussed. If you had a child that was assaulted on school property by an employee at their home, depending on what kind of, well, not necessarily what kind, but who was in those buildings and stuff like that. There's a lot of legal liability that goes along with something like that, and I'm not sure that the government wants to get into the business of providing housing for its employees. But if a private company wants to do that as part of the compensation package, that's one thing. But for the government to get into the business of becoming a landlord, so to speak, even if you third-partied it out, that doesn't necessarily remove the liability for the school system if it's on school property. So I admire the idea of trying to find innovative solutions. And there are schools around the country that have done this. Other constituents have brought this to my attention. But when the government starts to become the landlord for its employees, I just think that's very different than private companies providing it as a benefit package. A government should not be in the business of providing lodging to its employees. So, it's thought.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Kramer.
Thank you. On a counterpoint, the accreditation conference, Florida Police Accreditation Conference several years ago, the sheriff from Monroe County was actually lauded for this exact program. In Monroe County, the Keys, it was very difficult to find affordable housing for his employees, and he basically built housing. So I think that would be if anyone's out there looking at plans, that might be the one. I know earlier this year they did allocate more funding for that.
Yeah, Monroe County is unique. I know that they have their Chamber of Commerce actually has built housing as well, and they charter buses, and you come down and stay for a certain number of days, working like 12-hour shifts, and then you're bussed back up to Miami, and you stay in dormitory-style housing, and the Chamber runs that for a lot of the businesses down there. So it's a unique. Their average home price in Monroe County is like over $1 million, like 1.2, 1.3 million. So that's tough. It's like Hawaii. Anyone else on the subject of affordable housing? Okay. Let's move to we'll do number 3, and then we'll take a break after that. Discussion on coordination of future development. And Mr. Tatum, Mr. Tatum, was that yours?
Number 3?
Yes, sir. Was 3 yours or was 3 mine?
Well, I think
future development is, that was mine. That was number 3 was mine.
Okay.
So you have a staff presentation, I believe, on that, don't we? We were going to discuss our the fact that we've tackled our comp plan and working with the city of Bradenton on that because of the unique nature of the map of the city of Bradenton and its boundaries.
So we don't have a formal presentation, but we did bring our consultant, Kimley Horn, here. Kelly Klepper is here with us to talk about sort of where we stand right now with our comprehensive plan rewrite. Kelly has already met with the board members just very preliminarily to understand what their goals are. We are currently rewriting our entire comprehensive plan, which will then in turn prompt a rewrite of our land development code as well. And so Kelly can just give a little bit more information, but I think one of the intents was to allow piggybacking from the city of Bradenton, should they also, because clearly, and we understand the board's intent, that, the city is within unincorporated Manatee County, so we want to be sure that we're also meeting the goals of all. So Kelly, did you want to just say a few words about where we stand?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. For the record, Kelly Klepper with Kimley Horn. I'm not going to try to acknowledge everybody sitting here because that would take most of my time. We were engaged by the county to update and review the county's comprehensive plan. We've been doing this, except from a business standpoint, for a number of years, but we actually just started the process about 2 months ago. When I say we're on a fairly aggressive schedule, with the county, we're on about a 14-month schedule to review and provide updates, comments, as well as any further amendments. One of the things that we've been identifying right now is I'll call it the initial analysis component. So not just the consistency and compliance with Florida statutes, but also looking at it from a best engineering and best planning practices component. One of the things that we've identified in talking, of course, with county staff is the interrelationships between the county, the city, and everything that's going. Of course, there's two separate comprehensive plans. There's two different components that actually regulate both the city and the county. However, there is a number of overlapping policies, and it goes well beyond just the intergovernmental coordination. So one of the things that we'd identified is, regardless if Kimley Horn is doing both the city and the county, which I will say to those sitting at the city, we do have a continuing services contract, so we can move directly into that. But we also have the staff capable of doing both at the same time. We believe that if the city so desired, of course, it could be a cost savings to both entities, but also regardless if it's us versus another group, you're in a enviable position of being able to, I'll say, undertake both comprehensive plans, come up with a series of policies that would be beneficial to the community as a whole versus piecemealing at this time. I know that's fairly brief, but I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Chair Van Ostenbridge. Mr. Perry, could you give us a little kind of update where we are and what thoughts you might have in moving us forward?
Mr. Chairman, Mayor Brown, the city's engaged in some active introspection on where we're at on our comp plan as well. We have a multitude of different undertakings approved as recently as the last city council meeting that deals with a visioning process to look citywide at where we're at and where the future may take us and what our citizens want, what our business community wants, what our elected officials would like to see and the like. So we're trying to do a collaborative outreach effort to address visioning. And of course, the city of Bradenton's fairly diverse with a multitude of different geographical and cultural and historical areas. We're also hitting it with a strategic plan, trying to look more along the lines of what the infrastructure of the city may look like as relates to underground utility needs, roadway, and a host of other types of infrastructure. Thirdly, it had come up at the last meeting in the presentation by our planning division about heights in the URB core, which is known as the urban core. Specifically downtown, and modifications that would allow some short-term permission to merge. The proposal is to possibly merge T5 to T6, which is our maximum height zoning, to a 20-story level. T6 is 20-story. It includes a multitude of different bonuses that are required to get to that 20 stories. What we were contemplating looking at in that regards is a multitude of areas within that urban core, and the county has some of those areas, being the library that had been discussed, the Wears Creek Old City Hall property, across from the Suns building, and really increasing density and consistent with what some of the councilors were talking about to do a multitude of things, again, to address density and potential affordable housing and increase really what we can do within our footprint, particularly in the urban core. So we're hitting it from those particular facets. As it relates to updating our comp plan, that of course is required by state statute every 5 years, and that will ultimately, those three different types of studies will allow us to update that. I think it's a good idea, after talking with Chairman, yourself, and some of the other councilors, to integrate that in with the county because of the nexus with the borders of the county, and we want consistency, we want conformity, and those types of things. So we'll be talking with the planning department moving forward. I actually sent a text in to Ms. Singer, you'll be glad to see, about what kind of discussions had been had thus far. And I think it's a good undertaking to pursue.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Coker.
Yeah, in addition, we also have our CRAs have contracted with to do some visioning and strategic planning for our CRAs. And I also know that Realize Bradenton has hired someone to do some strategic planning. It's gonna be a lot of planning, a lot of input. I'd like to see some way to have everyone maybe coordinate all that together somehow, because that's a lot of planning going on.
And Mr. Chairman?
I think that onus probably falls on Mr. Perry and at the moment, Mrs. DePaul.
I think that's exactly right. That will require us to integrate in with the county and the county's contractor with the expertise to take some of those things from the city and obviously the county's interests, needs, and viewpoint as well. And I appreciate you pointing out that we do have the additional advantage of the CRA itself. and different types of advantages associated with that, taxing advantages and the like for redevelopment.
All right, so everybody's on board with that? That was an easy one. No other comments? Oh, yes, sir, Mr. Tatum.
So would this be a good opportunity? One of the things from the school board that I wanted to bring up, and I think we talked about, is just making sure that we're coordinating infrastructure when our schools are being built. And I've done a little bit of, is this a good time to talk about that?
Yes, sir, this is the appropriate time.
Okay, good. So I asked our staff to do a little bit of research on that, and generally for the schools that are coming up, it does appear that because a lot of them are being built in neighborhoods, that the developers are responsible for the infrastructure. But we did have a case, a number of years ago before I was on the board where Parish High School opened. We didn't have any sidewalks ready to go there. There could have been a little better traffic management plan, maybe bigger turn lanes, deceleration lanes, and things like that. So, and I know now some of our staff has reported there's a little bit of an issue going on with the county's doing some road work, and it's near or in front of some of our schools, and that's not going to be done maybe apparently by the time that the schools open, and so that's going to contribute to some of the traffic problems that we already have at our schools. So as I thought through this problem just a little bit, kind of maybe going back into some leadership lessons that I had from the military, when we're dealing with a problem like homelessness or these type of problems that seem to be constant and people are working hard on them, but they're not really achieving the goal that they want to get to. One of the good lessons was from General McChrystal when he was over in Iraq trying to track down some bad guys over there. Anyway, what he said eventually, he said, what I realized is there wasn't enough communication going on between the different organizations that were underneath me. And so what he did was he put liaisons from one organization into another one. For instance, we could maybe have someone who's a liaison person in the school construction management department that is literally the liaison with the county construction department. And I know they have meetings, but maybe they go to their meeting once a month and they say, oh, gee, you guys are going to start that road construction over there? Hey, our school's right there. Let's think about how we're going to mitigate that. And that's one idea that as I listen to what's going on today is these ideas of, and rather than just quarterly meetings, actually having liaisons that are kind of attached to each one of our organizations where they're regularly in constant contact with the other organizations that we have, to avoid the things that are happening right now, apparently, like, hey, schools are going to open, but we have road construction going on. If we could have coordinated that farther in advance, maybe we could have mitigated those problems. So just thinking of ways to do that a little better, because overall, I think the citizens of this county, they look at all of us sitting up here and they go, when they drive by that school and they go, hey, how come I'm waiting 20 minutes to pick up my kid at school? And they're looking at all of us to make sure that those things are not happening. So just a better coordination. One idea is putting liaisons in to others' organizations to see on a quicker basis what's going on there. So thank you for letting me bring that up.
Yes, sir, really valid. I mean, typically, we either blame the mayor or the school board in those situations.
Right, exactly.
But it is a really valid point, though. Commissioner Satcher, when he first got elected, the Parish High School issue was dropped right in his lap, day one, and it was it turned out to be much more complex than you ever could have thought, because it turns out the county really doesn't own any right-of-way. We own like 6 inches off the pavement along Erie, and so that turned out to be a long battle for him as well. If you drive down there now, you see where we even put little, we went around every utility pole because every inch was costing us a whole bunch of money. And we didn't want to pay to move them either. That would be crazy. So a lot of us learned our lessons living vicariously through Commissioner Satcher on the Erie Road deal. But you're right. I mean, we're 59th Street is a good example of we're going to 4-lane that, and you have 2 schools right there on 59th Street. One of them SUG, brand new, and you added to the capacity, and it's a gorgeous school, and we're appreciative of that in West Bradenton. But yeah, that's a very valid point, and hopefully administrators and superintendents are listening, and I think that falls on them. So.
One other point I'd like to bring up, just as a citizen driving around the county sometimes, but this contributes to overall traffic problems in general, and then certainly, as school starts, we're going to see on the 10th of August that traffic is going to increase in the morning. I've noticed that. I've been around long enough. I will see roads. One that comes to mind is I think it was 41st, Route 41 going north, kind of north of Cortez there, I think, or maybe north of 70. Anyway, it's a 4-lane road. For a half a mile, it's coned off and there's nothing going on there. And it sits there for like a week or 10 days or something like that. And just trying to minimize, and this was it wasn't like at 8 at night, it was right in the middle of the afternoon. So normally there's a busy route there. It's coned off for a week or 10 days at a time, but nothing's going on, trying to minimize those disruptions. I know work has to take place, but sometimes from my perspective, just as a citizen not involved in the county traffic plan, it just seems like these areas are coned off for long periods of time, and people are driving by, going 5 miles an hour when there could be a 4-lane road. I'm not being accusatory. I'm just kind of bringing that up from a citizen standpoint about, can we put a plan into place to try and minimize that disruption, especially during high traffic hours?
That's all right. We've trained our folks to point the finger at FDOT.
Well, that's what I'm doing, right? Good. We'll just keep pointing the finger.
We're prepared. But honestly, that could be one of the situations where we've strongly encouraged FDOT and a lot of our contractors to do their work at night. And so perhaps you're driving by during the daytime when nothing's taking place. I would hope that's the situation. Otherwise, it's possible that we're just paying, for cones and they're just sitting there, which hopefully that's not the case. But oftentimes we are doing work at night, and that's why it looks like nothing's getting done.
Sure.
So, all
Okay,
right.
great. Thank you.
Mrs. Sprague.
Good discussion about this. I would like to see a little more coordination between the district, county, and/or city, whichever the case may be. Our bus routes and students walking to those bus routes, and either right at the edge of the road and/or in the grass. And I know there's a lot of places a lot of bus routes have been the same bus route for year after year after year. So it's not like we're going to change anything. Those bus routes I would like to see have potential sidewalks put in areas where students are waiting. Oftentimes in water, they're actually up against other people's property just to stay out of the water. A good example of that is 26th Street and 45th.
We do get requests from the school board to install sidewalks in areas like that, and we almost always follow through with those. Occasionally, we've had residents push back when it was within neighborhoods. I can only think of one example of that, really. But it's not uncommon for the school district to reach out to us, and we add it to the list and
Okay.
get those installed.
Maybe staff that's here can hear me now, that we might get at least a concrete pad poured at this particular bus stop. And I guess.
You're saying it's a low area, and when it rains, the kids are in the water?
Yeah. Well, yeah, a lot of times I've seen kids just right on the edge of yeah.
The boys probably think that's great fun, and the girls think
Well, I've
terrible
seen
idea.
kids splashing in it, and then I see kids avoiding
Sure.
it, so.
Okay.
All right,
Well, yeah,
thank you.
we'll get with staff and take care of that then.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Perry.
On that point for Boardwoman Sprague, the city has done a partnership with the state. There's school safety grants for sidewalks, and we rebuilt sidewalks, quite a few actually in the city. Were done around school surrounding areas for pedestrian safety, flood control, other types of benefits that are associated with them. But it kind of gets to one of the points as far as the communications that we were talking about, that, if it's a city street, you guys, even at the school board, might not know what we're doing unless we happen to talk about it. Generally speaking, we would. I would think in most cases, we're hopeful that we do talk about it. But there's that state funding available, and we've embarked upon that through our public works program for probably about the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, it's gone through our MPO process,
Right.
and it's sidewalks to school safety. So there's some things that maybe, again, the school district isn't represented on our MPO in Sarasota, Manatee County. I don't think they are.
But that's a valid point. Maybe there could be a
Yeah.
communication breakdown there as well.
Yeah, so that could be something that there is grants out there. Unfortunately, sometimes the grants take 5 to 10 years, but when they do come together, we did one to Manatee High School down 7th Avenue just recently last year, and it really made a difference for kids. But it was another land issue that we had to deal with because we had to put it in front yards that didn't have sidewalks, and people were concerned, but not as much as I thought they would be.
Right.
And thank you, Mayor. Any other comments on item number 3, which is discussion of future development?
One close-up item, if I could,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman. Just what that discussion right there is a good example of if we have these people that are like from, let's say, the school construction department attending once a month, whatever county their compatriots are, their counterparts in the county, the quicker you know about these things, that tends to be the problem. It's not that we don't want to work together. It's that maybe we'll go for 2, 3, 4 months at a time, and someone in the county, because they're not tuned into the school thing, they go through their plan, they start taking actions, and if someone was there from the school to go, hey, that's going to affect us, because the people at the county, the city really aren't thinking about schools. That's just a good example of if we had these, and I know Dr. Weissong maybe is sitting over there going, oh, you want my people to go to more meetings, and that's, we can discuss that. But the point is that the more communication we have, and if we have these liaisons that are really talking to each other on a regular basis, we can avoid some of these issues where, gee, it would be a good idea, we just didn't know. Because I don't think anybody has bad intentions. I think it's just a matter of having quicker and more efficient communication between these organizations. Thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you. All right, any other final thoughts on item number 3? Okay, let's take a 10-minute recess, and then we'll come back and we'll finish 4, 5, and 6. It's 2:56 now. We'll return at 3:06. Okay, everybody, welcome back. We've moved on to item number 4 on our discussion. And item number 4 is discussion on noticing on county website. And essentially, there's a state law that changed that municipalities and local governments no longer have to advertise in local newspapers, which was costing us all a fortune. But it's counties that are over 250,000 people, which we qualify, and then the website has to have a certain minimum amount of traffic on it. So the county website has a significant amount of traffic on it, so we were hoping to sort of bring everybody together at one location. I'll turn it over to staff because we do have a presentation. Nicole, are you presenting on this? All right.
She
Mrs.
is.
Knapp will be presenting.
Yeah, just to start off really quickly. So we took a look at this at the end of last year. The Florida statute was passed and it took effect on January 1st. So we've actually been doing this since January 1st. It's been incredibly successful. It's a lot less expensive. And we do have, we meet the requirements in order to advertise on the website. So the one thing we had been reached out, the school board reached out to us sort of informally to ask about the potential, but it really stands for any municipality within the county because we do have that number of users that we need to hit or the number of residents in unincorporated Manatee County. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Nicole. She's got a brief little presentation to go through sort of the requirements. And then really, if we proceed with this, the next question would just be staff getting together and talking about what kind of volume you're looking at and things like that. So Nicole Knapp.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Nicole Knapp, Interim Director for Development Services. And I've actually, based off of Chairman Van Ostenbridge's introduction, I've skipped to slide 4. I think the slideshow was included in your packet. If not, it's online, and it just tells the whole story. But I'll skip to past the details that he already introduced. There's a lot of positives that have come from this change. The statute actually requires that. Thank you. The statute actually requires that it be easy for the readers to find. So it has to be within 1 or 2 clicks. So for us on our homepage of mymanatee.org, at the very top, there's a orange button that says agendas. And so with 1 click, it takes you to the agenda page, and you can look at all of our agendas, whether for any of our commissions, and they're sorted and organized by date. They're ADA accessible, and I'm sure as you all experience with your advertisements, there's a lot of back and forth communication with the newspaper, so that is now over. It's really created a lot of efficiencies. We're responsible basically for our own advertisements as well as our affidavits. So that's saved a lot of time. And we were able to also reduce the fee. So our development community used to pay $600 per advertisement to be in the newspaper, and with all the savings we've been able to increase with this, we estimate about 20 hours a month for our agenda coordinator alone. We've been able to reduce that fee from $600 per advertisement to $200 per advertisement.
Now that also includes a yellow public hearing sign. So, it does not.
No.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't that much, but really it depends on the volume. And so I think
Right.
$200, we think that it would definitely be less than that.
Right. So, but what that $200, what it includes for the development community, and I'll get to that here on the last slide maybe. So there's some responsibilities that go along with this. Like I said, we have to do the affidavit. We have to be responsible for creating the actual legal notice for the development community. So we do that. And then we also have to perform a yearly notice in the newspaper. So every January, we're going to put a notice in the newspaper letting everybody know that this is our process. So just you're required to do it once a year. And then we're also required to maintain a registry of all the people that would like to receive the email once a week that goes out that sees all these public notices. So why we're here today is to see if there's interest in any of the other jurisdictions using our website as well, but from your website, you would have to, from your homepage, put one click that's a direct link to ours. Our agenda coordinator would be responsible for putting it on our website, but your staff member sending it to us ready to go. We wouldn't be responsible for writing it or editing or, proofing those details. And then if y'all did maintain your own registry to your viewers and did your yearly ad in the newspaper, then we think it's very manageable on our end for a much lesser fee than what we assess. We haven't really run the nuts and bolts of it, but I'm going to say closer to the $100 to $125 range versus the $200 we're charging the development community. And that concludes our presentation. I'm here to facilitate any questions or discussions.
Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Chair Van Ostenbridge. No, I think it's something obviously we'd like to direct to our administrator and have him work with the county staff. Anytime we can streamline something and save money, it's definitely, in my opinion, worth something doing. So he could bring it and get it to the planning department and work through that.
I'll be glad to. I think on behalf of the city, Mayor Brown, Ms. Knapp, Mr. Chairman, we'd be very interested in pursuing this with you. Just the posting for a variance, I think we charge almost $1,000 because of that $600 fee.
Right,
And the
so-
like. So if we can bring that down, that's probably good for our citizens, good for our department. And of course, I think this is a case where more is better. They would, as you said, we would still maintain our website and the like, but we would link to yours and take advantage of other things that you do to meet public notification requirements.
And the statute does allow for you to do that as long as you can prove that the fee, the administrative fee that we would basically be assessing, which is bare bones, is less than what you're paying now. And easily, you've achieved that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
May I ask one more thing? So with the interlocals, though, I know we had discussed perhaps drafting a separate
separate
interlocal.
agreement.
Could we talk a little bit about that for a moment?
Right, we would need a very small, couple-page, maybe two-page agreement that then our boards would approve that speaks to the liability, the process, the fee, just the things that we would take care of versus you all. That I would think a simple 1 or 2 page agreement. We haven't discussed this with legal at all yet, but I can imagine something very simple would be needed.
All right, Chairman Schroeder, Dr. Weissong, any comments?
No, I think we've discussed this with our group, and it'd be something we'd be interested in, and we would just ask Dr. Weissong to get the staff, available.
All right, any other comments? Excellent. Well done, Mrs. Knapp. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on, number 5, discussion on a permanent generator at special needs shelter. Chairman Choate, I believe you added this item, sir. I do have staff with.
If I did,
I do have a staff.
I didn't know it.
Okay, I have staff with a high-level presentation prepared, so. Yeah, wrong Chad.
Yeah.
Big Chad, not little Chad.
Hanging Chad.
There we go.
Good afternoon, Chad Butso, Manatee County Public Works Director. You moved through the end of that last one real quick. So, not often does the county commission and the school board get together. I insisted just to say chat about this topic. One of our most fun things we do during hurricane season is we do a lot of preparing sheltering with the school board. In Public Works, I deal with the fuel supply system, so it's intimately related to the special needs shelter. So whether anybody knows or understands what we do, Nolan Middle School is the special needs shelter for the county. For 6 months of the year, the county has a standing contract with Ring Power. We rent a generator. It's sitting there in their yard waiting for us to use it. If a storm comes, we have to deliver the said generator and 2 fuel tanks to Nolan Middle School, have the appropriate mechanics set up the generator, attach the fuel lines, attach the electric lines, and be ready to turn that on and deliver fuel to the generator, all in those D-3, D-4 days before a storm, and hope nothing goes wrong. In the eyes of risk management, many times we've said this is a system, while inexpensive, is fraught full of risks. So in the results of Hurricane Ian, there was an allocation of hazard mitigation grant funds allocated to Manatee County. So now you need to propose projects that score properly, and if approved by FEMA, you can use a 75% portion, so it's a 75-25 grant. We, the county, have prepared a grant application that will be approved by our board to submit to FEMA. It's proposed on the agenda on August 8th. So it was, the point of bringing this topic up is to say, with this opportunity, talking with the school board, to know that staffs would need to develop potentially either a modified special needs shelter ILA interlocal agreement or a separate interlocal agreement on how we actually are going to pull this off, because we would need permission to do construction on school board property, to have the appropriate location for the generator, physical work being done to the school to put an automatic transfer switch in as well. I realize the special needs shelter was a very odd one in the sense of the sensitive equipment. Once they activate and are there under the direction of the health department, they always wanted to run off generator power. They always feared from that automatic transfer switch issue, the oxygen concentrators or other equipment that they had in there, that potential of a transient and unclean power. They always wanted to already be running on the generator. But through this project, we've proposed design and purchase and installation of the generator, the appropriate size tank that would go with the generator, and the appropriate electrical work. And we just think that's a good idea. I confirmed some of the process from our emergency management folks. While the funding is allocated to Manatee County as a jurisdiction, and it will stay in Manatee County, you do need FEMA approval of your actual application before you're able to spend it. So very likely an aggressive goal would be something that we're aiming for, maybe storm season 2025, but you got to start sometime to get that. So our August 8th meeting, the board would be approving the idea of coming up with a match, if so approved, and submitting that to FEMA with the hopes of moving forward with the intent of having a permanent generator at our special needs shelter.
All right. Thank you, sir. Chairman or Dr. Weissong? That's you, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that it's we would absolutely work with you to figure out, I mean, the construction and that sort of thing, of course. I know the shelters run by the health department, correct? Okay.
Yes,
So
yes, sir.
right. So I just want to make sure that we can just coordinate, obviously, with the ones in the trenches when it happens. So when I say happens, the shelter being used.
I mean, the captain obvious questions that also have to come through these things. It's on the school board property, but who's ultimately going to own the generator? So there's some significant discussion that has to have. Somebody has to own it. Somebody has to own and maintain it. If the county is owning it, the automatic switchgear, it's a benefit to the school. They can, if power would go out, because this is a generator that runs the entire school, so it maintains air conditioning as well.
I would defer to the lawyers.
We were just looking for that good nod to move ahead while waiting on FEMA approval.
Councilwoman Barnaby.
For someone who's had some personal experience with this, because my mother was on oxygen the last 10 years of her life, being able to go to the Nolan Special Needs Shelter was a blessing. She didn't necessarily want to go out there the very first time, but after she got out there and saw how wonderful all of the people were, she basically became the Martha Stewart of the shelter, and I had to buy snacks and card games and all sorts of things to take out there. So I would just encourage that you look at doing this, because it is indeed a very important blessing for those of us that have family members that need that kind of shelter.
Yes, well said. Thank you, ma'am. Mrs. Messenger. I keep wanting to say commissioner or council person, and I'm not sure what the official term is, so I just refer to you as Mr. or Mrs. if you're on the school board.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sure we've all been called worse, right? So we'll go with it.
Thank you, Big Kevin.
There you go.
I had one question. Is there, I'm sure there is. What does the model look like for other counties that have this type of generator? What's the setup look like?
Simple answer from my perspective is I do not know. I'd have to maybe see if Jody wanted to jump up to the microphone. If she knows, she is our new public safety director and appears to be. She's right there. Do you know that answer? Other special needs shelters in the state?
I need you the microphone on the record, please.
Didn't see you behind me, sorry.
Jody Fisk, Public Safety Director. I can actually ask some of the other counties to see how they work that out. It just depends on if they have entered into the interlocal agreement or if the school agreed to just turn everything over to the county to run, operate, and man the shelters. So I can certainly dig into that and find out which counties have that model.
Yeah, I'm not even necessarily talking about the legality of it, that will, I'm for sure, be worked out by our attorneys. I'm more talking about like the physical aspects of what that will change about our campus. And where will it be housed, the fuel that you talked about, those types of things, what is used at schools to ensure that it's housed in a safe manner so children are able to access it, the fuel, those types. I was really more talking about the physical part rather than the legal part, because I'm sure the attorneys will work that part out. But
Definitely one of the items that we expect to coordinate with the school, Mr. Penley or whoever we're working with, is the defined location. It's obviously not meant to deter or harm the use of the property. Being a permanent mount, maybe distance is a different. Maybe we have a bigger opportunity to put it different places. Typically, the tanks, the generator on top and the tank underneath is usually how these things are arranged. So definitely, it's not a tank sitting there by itself waiting to be, it's not an attraction. Typically, they can be fenced as well, and that's what I would recommend being on a middle school campus.
thank you.
All right, no other comments? Okay. I'm going to piggyback something off of Chad's item here, which applies to hurricane evacuation shelters. This was brought to my attention by someone who's really not, is actually a former school board member, knowledgeable person in the community, who brought to my attention that principals are, and their staff are, who are in charge, whoever the principal of that school is, I assume it's in their contracts that they have to be there during storms, and they're placed in charge of these shelters. And when Ian came in, one of the things we attempted to do was we went and sent social workers and code enforcement into homeless camps to try and spread the word that there's a very serious storm coming and they needed to seek shelter. We used MCAT and tried to pick up at specific homeless sites, homeless camps, and bring those folks to a specific homeless shelter. But we were at first, discouraged by the numbers because only like 300 folks showed up, and we knew that we had thousands of homeless. But then we started getting word from the shelters that many homeless were showing up to the shelters all over the county, so we breathed a big sigh of relief. You also have the issue, and we had MSO at all of our different shelters, but you have the issue of people coming in under high stress, some folks have drug addiction, some folks have mental health issues, some folks have criminal histories. And while we have a couple of MSO deputies at each shelter, this person that came to me with this idea was basically saying, is there any training that school board staff are being given, particularly the principals, who are, when the doors close, the doors lock, that's it. They are in charge of that situation. And all of the people that are inside there, and they're very, you're intelligent principals. But the question is, are they given any kind of training for those scenarios? And I don't know that they are. And if they aren't, is that something we would like to partner on? And perhaps public safety could do that. We could be talking about a couple hours on Zoom or something. I don't know how much in-depth training we're talking about here, but is that something that the school board would be open to partnering on? Mr. Weissong, Dr. Weissong?
Absolutely. We definitely want to be ready, and I think there are a number of variables at play, including the fact that you have lots of schools with new principals, right? And they're also going to move from one school to another. And so I think the opportunity to connect, to look at the specific issues at each shelter, talk about general best practices, but then also to to actually go through an exercise. I've been part of those in the past, and it just puts your mind at ease that when you have to do this for real, you've been through this setup before, and you've already learned some things from the experience. So can never do enough of that.
Okay, so, Mrs. Fisk, do we need to go any further, or you guys can just reach out to one another and connect and
Yeah.
work on this?
Yeah, we can do that. It really depends on the kind of training that you're looking for and what shelter we're talking about.
Personally, I defer to you. Mrs. Spray?
Oddly, this comes up because this is one of the things that I brought up to our superintendent this morning with my briefing, that there should be I don't know, do you do a dry run in the event? Do you do an exercise every year in the event of a storm coming our way?
So we can certainly assist with facilitating if somebody wanted to do a full-scale exercise on opening the shelter, getting it running down the list of supplies. That's certainly something that we can do. Otherwise, really that tabletop or that in-person direct training is far easier to facilitate, especially because if you're talking about that full scale, you're talking about doing it in the school, opening the supplies, going through the kits. It's about a year's worth of planning to do that. We certainly can, but it wouldn't be for this storm season.
Right. Well, that's something I think that we should probably look at doing. We do all these other things that we're trying to partner with. I think going through the EOC and everything that department does. Myself, I'm not familiar with everything that goes on behind the scenes. I'm usually listening to it on the news or whatever device I can find, or watching it out my window, which I did last time. So anyway, I just think that would be a good thing to do.
Okay.
All right, any other comments? All right, thank you very much. Our last item, number 6, is discussion on the county-owned former City Hall location located on 15th Street East of the corner of 15th Street and Manatee Avenue on Wares Creek. I believe Charlie Bishop is here from Property Management because it is, Carmine is coming up. Okay. So it is county-owned. We had it looks fairly blighted, let's be honest, as you come into the city of Bradenton. I've certainly heard about it from my friend, the mayor, and my friend, the vice mayor as well, and some other council people, and some residents. And so folks want to see something happen with this property. It was originally used, just to give you a little bit of background, it was the dewatering site when Wares Creek was dredged. It was tied to that agreement as the permanent dewatering site, but I think the mayor and the council are correct. That's not an acceptable use for one of the most prime pieces of property in the city, and something that's at the entrance to the gateway to the city. The county has reached out to the Army Corps and put in applications for alternative dewatering methods for future dredging of Wares Creek. And we've ultimately the property has been released from that agreement in writing. And so at this point, we are free, the county is free to do, whatever we want, basically, with that property moving forward. And so we put a fence around it because it becomes sort of a homeless camp, and then folks were parking in the parking lot, and there was a trip and fall, and, Mr. Clegg's looking at like a 6-figure settlement for the trip and fall, and maybe he's whittled it down. I don't know. We're counting on you. But and one of the demands from the senior living facility next door was that we repave it and put in lighting and do all these improvements. We're like, whoa, this is not. I don't think this is a permanent parking lot. So instead, we put a fence around it, which leads us to where we are today. But we certainly want input from the city and the school board on what everybody would like to see with the property going forward. Carmine, what do you have to add on to all of that?
Carmine D'Amelio, Acting Director of Property Management. Chairman, you covered it just about completely. It's a 3.7 acre piece of property. You get that image up on this? Mostly made up of a parking lot. We're looking to surplus the property through an ITN, intention to negotiate. We installed the perimeter fence 2 weeks ago, and this Thursday we'll be installing the gate. There's 4 cars left in the parking lot right now, Code enforcement is helping us get them out. And once those cars are out, we'll lock it down on Thursday afternoon. Exactly what the chairman said, that we have some liability and safety concerns in there. So we're going to lock it down to everyone and just wait for some direction on that.
And as the map is up there, just for a frame of reference, 3.7 acres, the current City Hall site, which the city just sold, what'd you get for that, Rob? 10, 12?
We're working through a process.
Oh, you're in a process, okay. They're working through a process on that, but that's 4 acres, and this, I mean, obviously, it's not as, in quite as prime a location, but still, 4 acres, this is 3.7. There's a lot of potential for this site. The views are fantastic. It's right there at the entrance to the city, and it could be something really beautiful and something very welcoming. But anyway, if Carmine has nothing else to add, I just wanted to I want to open this up. Councilwoman Moore.
I see here that it says, that, was it the appraisal that said that the best and highest use was multifamily residential? Or did that come from another source?
I don't think we've had an appraisal on this, have we? Maybe an in-house opinion of value?
The cover letter says that you guys got one last August.
Oh, well, there you go.
Perhaps in the form of a senior housing development, a commercial retail use, or a combination thereof. So I just was curious if that proposed use was from the appraiser or if we had some other source for it.
We have yet to have a board discussion on it, so
Okay.
that had to have come from an appraiser.
And then I have another question, which is, forgive my ignorance, what is it currently zoned to do? And is there some action that the city council would have to ultimately entertain?
Well, I'm not sure exactly. I think it's T5, but we're going through our process right now, and that is in part of the urban core development. So, and I think one of the things to me was that, and people calling, and for years, well, what's the city going to do with it? Well, as we know, it's county-owned property, and it was sold pretty quickly after we moved to, if everybody remembers Dottie McCarthy, and there was going to be a development there that fell through over the years, and then they used it as a dewatering site. Well, with the restrictions that Army Corps and Swift Mud and all the others put on it for the dewatering, said you can't make us leave that like that for 99 years. And, the county has done a great job through Mr. Clegg, and there are people to say, hey, what is alternatives? Plus, if we ever do dredge Wares Creek again, which I'm sure one day that'll happen, we don't want that sludge in our city like it was for years and stunk and all of that. And they've found some other alternatives that are even safer and more environmentally friendly long-term. And if it happens again, it could develop our river bottom into have seagrass again. So there's opportunity for win-win-win as far as not having it as that, and then obviously a developer would have to come forward and do something. I have no idea, there's nothing out there. It's just the first step. And I know we've already got emails and phone calls about the city closing off with the fencing, but again, it's a county-owned property, and we've talked to the management of DeSoto Towers, and, they have a development agreement from the original, how many cars they can have, and they well exceed that right now.
And obviously, anything that was built there, I mean, the counties, I don't think our board is interested in going vertical and building anything. But we could there could be requirements tied to whomever we sell it to as to what would come of the property. It's T5 now, but hopefully T6 soon as far as zoning goes, which means you could go 20 stories in that location. It could certainly benefit both of our tax rolls.
Well, also, one of the things that has been discussed, and I mean, Ms. Barnaby's been around longer than I have in some of that, with a little break in between. But I was saying that in a nice way. So, that we would always try to have something along the waterfront there that was in a park setting. So that would be something I, as one individual, as the mayor and hopefully the city council, would say, hey, how do you tie our riverfront together? We know there's development going to the north of there, and some other things that are going on with Westminster that maybe we can tie it where it goes all the way, and sometimes to the Riverwalk, not connect to the Riverwalk, but get over that way into Point Pleasant. So there's opportunity to still keep some public land access And right now, if you go up there around the mangroves, it's homeless. So like Chair Van Ostenbridge said, the fence is doing two things. It's stopping liability, but it's also hopefully cleaning up that area, which is the entrance, quote unquote, to our downtown urban core.
Vice Mayor, who?
I think Mary Ann was next.
Oh, Councilwoman Barnaby?
Since I was thrown into this discussion.
Can you get a little closer to the microphone, ma'am?
How's that?
As long as we can hear you.
Okay. When Ms. McCarthy had the property and was talking about doing development there, the mayor is absolutely correct. There was supposed to be a linear park along the creek there, and she wanted to name it after Dr. Gainey, if I remember correctly.
All right, Vice Mayor.
While I definitely am glad that we've got it contained so that people can't get on there, I would like to see this put to the front burner. I mean, a chain link fence right at our gateway, I mean, it's just awful looking. So I'd like to get this figured out quickly. Just doesn't look great.
Sometimes putting a chain link fence right out there forces the issue to be resolved sooner than later. Mrs. Spray.
I'm just hoping it doesn't end up being a storage unit or a car wash.
Who would possibly put that at the
Who
entryway to
would
their?
put, that's my thing, a car wash or a storage unit. That's my two cents.
It'll say like lockup or something silly like that.
Yeah.
Well said.
Just saying.
Chairman Chodes. You gonna propose a car wash
Well, I was.
or an arcade?
I would look, and obviously I'm not the one doing it, but I would look to see, is there a way that we could use that property potentially to help traffic in that downtown area, divert, I don't know. I mean, this is not my area. But yeah, roundabout, something to help with from 3 to 6 o'clock. I mean, from a school district standpoint, it's going to help our buses and our travel. And I know that's a big ask. It's a whole different change, but maybe that's just a thought.
A roundabout is not a bad idea.
Yeah, but it has been studied in the past, and we're going through some studies right now, and unfortunately, where do they got to go? And that's the problem with some of it. So I know that there is some options to look at, and I agree with that from the standpoint of looking, but we can look back at what some of the other studies have done, because it's not about that point right there. It's where do they spill out into? And unfortunately, it's right onto Manatee Avenue, and there's nowhere to go. So we've got, which again, Chair Van Ostenbridge, through the MPO and some of the things we're working through. I think we have a few MPO board members here, but some of other alternatives are in the process right now with the DeSoto Bridge replacement and with other situations that could be coming up, which will be very crucial to all three of these boards in the future, that decisions will have to be made that, still may take 20 years to get to, but if it's not made now, it'll just be another 20 years, because in the 90s, their decision was not to do anything, and here we are still talking about it. So there's opportunity out there for traffic, and but are we going to be that group that's going to make that big decision that we may not? Well, some of us in this room might be around, hopefully, but some of us won't to even see it start.
Mary Ann will still be on the council at that point. Commissioner Cruz.
I'll just remind you, part of our discussion on the county level is we've got to deal with our parking garage, and part of the solution to 2,000 employees parking is that space in the near term. So, well, nobody wants to talk about a parking lot indefinitely there and the fence around there. This may be something that, well, it takes years. I mean, like you're seeing with City Hall. I mean, it doesn't mean we can't start the process now. I mean, Sarasota County sold their county building with a 24-month lease back, so we can still start the process. But let's remember, there's going to be a period where we most likely need to keep that as parking.
Yeah, 100%.
While we work through that. Relative to downtown, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I don't see how that's going to help I think the ways of fixing traffic downtown is long-term, a flyover on the bridge so you can bypass it. And in the near term is making everything one way, honestly. That's the way you're going to fix it, because there's no right of ways, so you can't widen these roads, but you can make them all one way. It works very efficiently in places like downtown St. Pete. You just got to get people used to a new traffic pattern. It'll at least help. It certainly won't fix, but it'll help.
And again, we are in the midst of a MPO traffic study on 9th that will hopefully do some of that, because we know 9th and the corridors are the ones that create the backup farther down. So that's something that hopefully will come out in the near future of little mitigation opportunities to help it. I mean, there is no silver bullet right now. And that's what people have to do. And again, we drive it. All of us drive it a lot. So sometimes, and I've said this many times, 10 or 15 minutes, 20 minutes, we've got to work within that. When there's an accident, unfortunately, it takes longer. But no, it's going to start in what, 8 days, 9 days? And, we look to our school board friends on that one. If they'd start school at 5 in the morning and end at 10 at night, there wouldn't be a traffic problem anymore. So no, it's not a joking matter, but you do see a huge difference when school is in and out. So, and that's something that, as Commissioner Cruz talked about, there's going to be an alternative that's probably going to come up sooner than later with an opportunity for all of us to weigh in on.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Satcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've kind of talked to county staff a little bit behind the scenes. And then even in a board meeting before our recess, I mentioned alternative ways to fund traffic solutions. I think our financial department didn't really get where I was going because they came back talking about commercial paper. But honestly, I think we need to look at some toll roads. I think we need to look at a bypass on the east side of the county and then a route across the county. Of course, we've got the new, a road where the bridge is opening up right now for 44th, but that still is not a full solution. People want to be able to get to, we've been talking about how much property values are going up. And I feel like we owe it to our citizens to really think boldly about how to make it where people can enjoy the beach and get around. And also 75, two people try to merge at 70, and every single back road that I know in all of, Palmetto and Parish plus 301 plus 64 is backed up. It gets ridiculous. I mean, I remember getting a text from the chair, doesn't the meeting start at 9? And
I run a tight ship. Okay.
Yeah, and sure, it did start at 9, and I would have been on time, and I was, just sitting at every little, and running Waze apps to try to get around it. And it happened day after day after day. And I feel like since Ian, people going south, contractors, et cetera. I don't want to belabor the point, but I am very interested in looking at toll roads, because then we can bond, because the county, we are tapped out as far as our, what's coming in to build roads, hundreds of millions of dollars that we put towards fixing roads that hadn't been spent for, a decade where they had sat. But at this point, we're moving forward, but I think we need to look into toll roads. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's a bold statement, but I think you're right. I mean, that's generally where Florida's heading. Yeah, but bold of you to bring it up. Councilman Kramer.
Thank you, sir. Is it on? Okay. To steer us back to the discussion off toll roads and everything, if you own the property, if the county owns the property and you mentioned some type of development there.
If you want to make an offer now, the whole board is here and it's an advertised meeting. We can discuss something now.
For a linear park.
Yeah. The question is, if we're looking at that being the gateway to downtown, and we're looking at potential development in our downtown urban core and even changing it to T6, what would the county be entertaining as something that they would allow at a purchase and then sale of the property and then development of the property? How high do you want to go?
Well, I mean, generally speaking, we need it for parking in the short term.
I'm past the short term.
And then we would like to get money for it.
Right.
in the
Past-
longer term.
So, I understand. We know you need to park there.
But it's your city and
what's
it's the
next?
entrance
What's
to your.
next after that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, just kind of bringing it up because, hey,
First
it's,
time we've ever had this conversation.
yeah, it's finally free of.
But we can have that conversation
Yeah, it's
now,
finally-
and it's been noticed
You guys
and
3 years to
it's
decide what
been
you're gonna-
put on there. So I guess that's the question. What
Technically,
what-
we're a government, so we always have clear title, but you know, in a sense that everybody would understand, we finally have basically like clear title on it, right? We're out from under the Army Corps on this, and so now we can do what we please with it, and so you know, we have the whole city council here, and it's going to have a significant impact on your city. And obviously, we would need approval from the council, or whomever buys it would need approval for their site plan and whatever they're planning to do there. I thought the linear park idea, and I assume what Councilman Barnaby means and what you're referring to, sir, is like a river walk, like a creek walk. Let's call it a creek walk because we're on the creek. First question is DeSoto Towers, is there any public access along their shoreline? And then what about down by Westminster? Is there, I don't know if there is any public access. If there is, I mean, now we're cooking with gas, right? I mean,
Right, but then you have to bring DOT in as far as crossing over 64 or underneath. I don't
I
think
believe
there's
that
any way
bridge
to
is
do
going to be
that.
replaced in the next 5 years anyway, so that could be worked into the design. The Wares Creek Bridge is scheduled for
Mr. Mayor, you can
replacement.
speak to that. I don't.
Yeah, no, what, the reason I thought this was important to bring up at this time is because obviously, again, we can't talk about it outside the room. The chairman and I can because we're not on different boards, or we are on different boards, but I thought it was important to bring up because we know on our city hall property, what we're doing right now, we are putting some restrictions on what we want to see as a board. But again, when it's sold to the developer, if they meet what the regulations and codes are, they can build what they want. But if we have an agreement with them, we can have an agreement with the county to say, when you sell it to a developer, here's what has to be there, or what we want there, and then how we come up with the development agreement in part of it. Because again, I think that, you know, when people buy it, they have the right to build whatever they want if it meets the code. But if we put into it saying, hey, we want this, this, and this, you know, and they come up and say, yeah, I can do that, or no, I'm not buying it. But they would know going in what can be done. And I think there's an opportunity, especially along there. We know that the seawall, at times when the tide is in, that the water is over top of the seawall and going down from John and Rebecca Neal Park to this area. I think there's opportunity to work that from there in front of DeSoto Towers while also fixing a little bit of the seawall at the time coming up. I think there's a lot of discussion still need to be had. But I think there's opportunity to look at it, and I think it's important as we wordsmith through some of our changes in our urban core, we'll be able to say, okay, if we do this, what could they get there? And what can the zoning part of it, and what can they do? So we're able to see it. And one of the things we did talk about the other day was that we put time limits on some of that. So we're not sitting here 20 years from now waiting. We want development to happen. And when a property goes from government-owned to privately owned, there could be some opportunity for the city to do more things in areas that might not have been done before, because no taxes to tax dollars in an area. And as we know in the city too, is we are pretty much 14.4 square miles. So we're never changing unless we annex something in, which doesn't happen very often anymore. But we have opportunity to grow what we've got in a smart way. You know, I know we're going to get a lot of emails and questions about some of the things, but some of this has to be discussed in the public eye.
Okay.
And I guess other thoughts that I thought might come up would be, you need a grocery store downtown.
Right.
We can't force one. I like the idea of public access along the water. If you're going to do that, you're probably going to shrink the footprint of like the parking, I would think. So then you're likely looking at some levels of parking, like a parking garage to some extent within, and then looking at, you know, residential above that. Is it possible, or would you want us to try to work a grocery facility, you know, grocery store into this site? Maybe the traffic pattern doesn't work. I don't know. I don't know that it's going to be great for ground level retail, like walk in, walk out, because you have the creek on one side. DeSoto Towers, I guess, could walk over, but you have Manatee Avenue on two sides and the creek on one side. It's kind of isolated. It's kind of on a little bit of an island. I don't see a whole lot of pedestrian traffic being attracted to it. but maybe a grocery store works on the ground level, and then parking, and then above that. And maybe not, I don't know, I'm just sort of thinking on the fly, shooting from the hip. It would be, there's a lot of trips going by that spot anyway, to be honest. Anyway, just ideas for you all to think about, and you know, your council can always send us a letter at a later date after if you want to workshop it and give us more feedback. As Commissioner Cruz said, we need it for parking for probably at least 2 years.
Yeah.
And hopefully you'll work with us with your garage on parking as well, because that would help tremendously. Mr. Tatum.
Just a little bit of out of the box thinking, I know that's a cliche, but I was actually out at Jiggs Landing the other day, out towards the Lakewood Ranch area, and I'd never really been out there before in the sense of understanding. They've done a really good job. They put like a little restaurant out there and a bar, and they have music, and then they built a walkway, and I said, well, is this private? And they said, no, it's a concession on a park. And I thought, well, that's an interesting concept. And, if you're coming right into Bradenton, and that's really, you want to make an impression on people, a nice sign there, welcome to Bradenton, maybe you have a restaurant there, and you could make money off the concession. And so I know you'd probably rather make millions of dollars off property taxes, but, if you could make that into a nice park with maybe like an ice cream shop and a restaurant, and people downtown could go there for lunch and sit by the water and still have some public access. I don't know. That's just a little bit of out of the box thinking to make it look a little nicer than a big apartment building or something like that. You can still make some money off the concessions that are there. So thanks.
No offense to people who live in big apartment buildings downtown and think that they're nice looking, Mr. Mayor. Any further comments on that one? I think we've heard from every council person on it. I think. Okay. Oh, no, we have not. You have no comments. You don't care. Do whatever we want. Okay. All right. Any further comments then on item 6? All right. Hearing none. I know the vice mayor said that she had an additional item she'd like to bring up at the end. Ma'am?
Yes, I would really like to try to work towards some kind of solution with removal of the scaffolding at the Judicial Center. It is long past time to either repair, remove, whatever the problem is. There doesn't seem to be any incentive to get this resolved.
I think you'll find a lot of consensus in this room. Mr. Clegg, that issue is in your department, sir. Provide us a little bit of background as well.
It's partly in mine. It's also in property management. They're on in the day-to-day communication with the contractor. So I honestly don't know where the last report I got, they'd run into more repairs than they anticipated on the exterior of the building. I don't know is Charlie here? Can he add to that?
Would you mind giving us some background though, Mr. Clegg, on how
Well, we have a
how we got
settlement
here?
agreement with them, and they're required to repair the defects, and they're significant on that building. And they did, I think, a couple of sides, and it went very well, and they were ahead of schedule. And then they ran into an area where they had a lot more than they anticipated having to do. But they are still under that settlement agreement with us. It's a considerable amount of money. That's a lot of money to fix the building for a defect that was discovered years after the construction was complete. And they're still working through it, is the last report I got. Carmine, I don't know if you have
Yeah, I
anything.
can give a brief update.
Mr. Chair, could I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir, Mr.
What
Mayor.
is the purpose of the scaffolding?
Safety.
Keep people from
Public
getting hit
safety.
on the head with falling debris.
No, I know that, but I want
Yeah,
the
that
public
is
to
the
know
purpose, to keep
that
people
there
from-
is some defect in the fascia of the building. The building is not unsafe, but it's just the facade look.
The precast panels, there's some debris that's falling. It's a safety concern, so that's why the scaffolding's still there. The good news is that we're just about done with the precast panels on the repairs. They're working on the 9th floor. There's a little wall on top of the roof there that they're working on, but it looks like September 1st will be 100% complete. And then we'll continue with the scaffolding probably another month after that. Then we'll start to disassemble that.
I heard it brought up that 3 of the 4 sides are complete and that there's just one side. Is that the case? And if so, is it possible to remove scaffolding from 2 or 3 of the sides?
That is the case, but I'm not sure if we can remove a piece of the scaffolding, but I'll look into
Can we
that.
look into that?
Yes.
That would make the vice mayor very happy.
I think what we would need is,
October.
Oh, she has a birthday in October. She'd like it done.
I think the issue would be whether the engineer is willing to give us a release before we can remove the
Yes.
scaffolding. That's really what, it's the question is, can they certify that it's safe and it no longer needs to be there? We're not looking at a liability for somebody walking along the edge of that building and being at risk of injury or death.
That's correct.
Okay. Are there any other additional comments or items that anyone would like to bring up before we adjourn? Oh, we have public comment. Well, from you before we go to the public. All right. Seeing none, we will, oh, yes, sir, Commissioner Satcher.
I just wanted to go back to Board Member Tatum's idea about just liaisoning together. I don't necessarily know that I want to create some board or something like that. But as the meeting's gone on, I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. Because how often, I mean, I get calls all the time from people and they're asking about a road project and I know it's a state road or I know it's in the city limits. I know the school boards are, fixing that area and that it's actually not the county. But it might be smart for us to have something set up to where when something's about to move or preferably earlier on in the process, they kind of just have a way of touching base, even if it's an email chain, seems like. I'm sure they do some of that already. But anyway, just want to say if it comes up in the future, I'm kind of getting warm to the idea. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Seeing no one else, then, we're going to go to public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward to address any of the elected officials or all of the elected officials on items that were discussed during today's meeting? Sir, please state your first name, your last name, your county of residence, and you have 3 minutes to address the board.
So, great meeting. Good to see all you here. So hopefully I'll get 3 minutes for the 2 items.
You have 2 items, okay.
So,
First and last name, county of residence.
Glenn Gibolina, for the record, Manatee County, 41 years. So I sent all of the board members and school board members article, say, rising rents, not mental health issues or addiction, are driving the homelessness. So that's your new homelessness are the baby boomers. They're going to be the entry-level school teachers, sheriff's office. They cannot sustain $2,000 rents. And this article goes on to say, let me read a couple of parts of it. Rent is the number one issue that is causing homelessness. Housing instability. Affordable housing cannot be left to private market because the amount of rent that people with the lowest income can afford to pay does not cover the cost of operating and maintaining the building. This is a basic market failure that requires government intervention. I know you want to hear about socialism, capitalism. You need vouchers because the difference between the rent increase and what they can afford, we need to fund that gap. So you get a family thrown out, right? They go to Salvation Army, 1 trip to the hospital, $6,000, $8,000, $10,000. That's the gap financing. I know you don't like that word. That's the gap voucher that these people need to stay in their homes so they don't get thrown out to be homeless. The plumber, the fireman, they're going to be your next homeless because they cannot keep up. We heard it today. One of the administrators dropped out. Starting salary of $205,000, and he can't afford to live here. What does that tell you about the rest of the service industry? Our entry-level service workers. It's unbelievable. And I'm a numbers guy. 62 out of 67 counties, we are the most difficult place to find affordable housing, workforce housing. There are 61 other counties that these employers have a better chance to find their employees a reasonable rent. I never hear that picture. So the school board, this goes on for decades. I'm glad Dr. Weinsong here is, we're moving the direction on on the impact fees, but my God, you guys have had it at a flat rate of $6,400, $2,700, whether it's a 500-foot efficiency or a 6,000 square foot mansion. Bam, $6,427. Who's going to build affordable housing when you get hammered with impact fees by the school board? They're going to a sliding scale now. It's still not enough because they're going to go to the 40%. But guess what? They're going to raise it 10% every year for 4 years. Are the school teachers going to get a 40% increase in 4 years? No, they're not. The rent increases, the landlords aren't going to come down on that. They're not going to come out.
Are you on to your second issue?
I'm on my
sir?
second issue.
Okay, go ahead.
Affordable housing. So, Livable Manatee, thank God, they have been paying that $6,000 impact fee for the school district. But the school district isn't doing enough. Hopefully they will be doing enough, but that sucked out a lot of money that could have been better spent in building affordable housing. The LORAs, it's real simple. It's a 25-year LORA, 30 to 120 AMI. Forget this 120 stuff only. Forget these 7-year notes. Forget 10-year notes. It's 25 years, 30 to 120. 10 to 25% of that project. End of story. If they're not willing to do that, don't give them the density. You guys rubber stamp density is like, oh, we need housing. Yeah, we need housing on the low end, not the high end. The hurricane didn't help. All these people come from Naples, and I'm a landlord. Say, hey, you got something coming up? Yeah, well, I'll double your rent, and here's an insurance check for a year. Who can turn that down, right? So those people that had reasonable rents are getting squeezed out because market rate is doing it. Vouchers are the way to go. Mayor Jean with Bill Isley, form-based code, that was a winner. We need to get form-based code within the county. That makes all the difference in the world. Smaller lot sizes, there's just so much that we can do. 9.9% live in poverty. Over 40,000 people, citizens, moms, dads, school kids, live in poverty in our county. And that needle hasn't moved in years. We're 30,000 units behind in workforce housing. So the new norm should be homeless housing because they're never going to be able to afford a house, much less afford the market rate. So I think we need to do a tandem, affordable housing and homeless shelters ASAP, and get on board with some vouchers. Keep these people from getting thrown out. And these are good people, hardworking people. I got a plumber across the street getting thrown out. He makes good money, but they're doubling his rent. He has no clue where he's going. He's not the only one. There are tens of thousands of people that are in that situation.
Thank you, sir.
Homeless students, by the way, 1,000. Go check with Project Heart. And those aren't counting the gotaways, the moms and dads that are sleeping in their cars because they don't want child protection services coming to see you. But we're not even counting the gotaways. Great meeting.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward to address the board on items that were discussed during today's meeting? Okay, not seeing anyone, we're going to close public comment at this time. Is there anything further from elected officials?
Just one quick comment.
Yes, sir.
Chair, you're going home Manatee Avenue, west of Wares Creek, maybe go around it. There was an accident that they're working right now with an overturned vehicle, so.
Does Manatee Ave closed?
I think part of it is, yes.
Yeah, westbound closed at 22nd Street.
I'm not sure where it's at in the timing, but, you might want to make an adjustment around that.
Okay. All right, thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.